Hello and welcome to the Rays of Hope program. I'm your host today, Mary Foley, and I'm so glad you've joined us for the edition of Rays of Hope today. It's fall time, and I'll tell you, there's lots of change in the air. And I heard a powerful quote the other day, and it went something like this: endurance is not the ability to overcome difficult things, but the ability to turn them into glory. And so on this program, we talk about difficult things, and today we're going to talk about tools and techniques to help you, the viewer, turn those difficult things into glory. And to help us do that today is Trisha Pletcher. Thank you so much for being on today's program. What is your official title, and explain to me what it means?
Well, I wear a couple of different hats, Mary, actually. I do own my own practice as a life coach. And what I mean by that is I work with folks, usually one-on-one, sometimes in groups, or sometimes with retreats, or in different gatherings like that, or conferences. But most of the time when I'm working with folks and I'm coaching them, I'm really talking with them about where are they right now in their life and where do they want to be out here. It could be a month down the road, it could be 6 months down the road, it could be 5 years down the road. We set those goals, and then I work with them from week to week to hold them accountable, to start breaking it down and taking actions to move along that path towards where they want to, what they want to manifest.
Sure.
So that's one of the roles that I wear, or hats that I wear, I guess I'll say. I also am the prevention coordinator for the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs.
Which is a huge job.
It is, as you know from the work that your fabulous staff is up to over in this region as well.
So talk to us a little bit about what it means to be a prevention coordinator. Prevention of what first, and how is that working across the state?
So I mostly work with folks in this, again, as you indicate, prevention could be all kinds of different projects and different activities that we'd be doing through the association, or KSAP, is what we call it for short. Primarily what I'm asked to do is to help all of our programs through KSAP, the 13 programs across the state. I'm asked to support them as they implement the Green Dot program in the high schools, and as they're working in their communities to gather folks together on what we call community prevention teams, groups that want to come together from all different agencies and walks of life, leaders and decision makers in the communities who can come together and brainstorm and strategize, and then take that action, as we were talking about again, around preventing what we call power-based personal violence. So that includes sexual assault, it includes intimate partner violence, it includes stalking as well. So anything that has that personal connection. So in my role, what I get to do, I have the pleasure of being able to talk with the folks on the front line, including your program here, being able to work with them as they do that work of prevention in the region, in the communities, begin to strategize again about how we can focus on primary prevention instead of just focusing all of our efforts on intervention, working with folks in that way.
Yes, and you bring up such a good point. I think historically, people in the community may be used to seeing agencies like PASAC out doing awareness campaigns, trying to raise awareness, and that's really important. But really what the Center for Disease Control and the association is moving to is this idea of primary prevention, and how do we really focus systematically and strategically on intervening before this ever occurs, and prevention in its truest form. And you mentioned Green Dot, and we've had Green Dot programs on this show before, but for folks who maybe are tuning in for the first time and they're saying, what is a Green Dot? Well, how would you tell them about what it is that educators and preventers, if you would, across the state are doing?
What a brilliant question, because again, we tend to throw that term around now. We're so used to it. We tend to throw it around as if everybody knows what it means. And when we're talking about Green Dot, there's an actual curriculum and program that was put together, that was born out of the University of Kentucky, that was sort of piloted there. And now it's really grown. It's actually across 26 different universities across the country.
Wow.
The creator of Green Dot, Dr. Dorothy Edwards, has taken it to Japan and Singapore, and it's really spread, all over the place.
It's unbelievable.
It is, and it is, as someone said yesterday. I was at the community prevention team meeting, here in your region just yesterday, and someone made the point that it is viral, and when people do hear about it, they can almost taste how tangible it is and how easy it is for them to get involved. That really all of us are able to step right into it. So let me explain what it is. So it is this program, but the concept of it is really saying that if you would imagine a map of the United States, and we might have seen those movies, or you think about a disease that you see this map where there are these little red dots of where there are a couple of outbreaks, and then you'll hear, someone say, but if this spread, there'd be all of these red dots, and they sort of explode across that map, right? And the concept of Green Dot is, if all of those red dots on that map are acts of power-based personal violence, or even someone who might not be intervening or doing something, or saying something, or distracting from something, a personal power-based violence act of happening, that would be a red dot as well.
So not doing anything to stop the violence.
Right, not being what we call an active bystander, and stepping into a couple of different choices that we could make. It might be that we directly would say something or actively try to prevent something from happening. It could be that we just want to distract because maybe I have some barriers or obstacles. Maybe I'm shy, or I'm not sure what to say or do, and so I might just want to distract by, maybe I'm in the grocery store and a situation is making me uncomfortable between a parent and a child, and so I might distract by just going up and talking, stopping that argument from happening maybe. Another strategy is using what we call to delegate. It's the third D, if you will. And that would be really looking for other help and assistance. So it could be calling 911. It could be finding your, the security in your building if you hear, again, sort of loud shouting or something that's making you feel uncomfortable in here. So again, back to this map, if we're picturing this map of the red dots, what Green Dot is if you imagine that map of red dots, if there also were all of these green dots that were spreading across that map, those green dots are those acts that I just described. They're actually stepping into doing something to act and to be an active bystander. And those green dots can be things in the moment, like those examples that I just described, delegating, distracting, directly engaging, stopping someone or saying something about it. They also can be things that we do on the front end. And we're back to prevention again, just like where we started. They can be things like wearing and I, again, embarrassingly enough, don't have my green dot button on, but it could be wearing a green dot button. It could be putting a poster up in our office. It could be having a conversation when we go home with our kiddos, at night. So it can be those, what we consider to be proactive actions that again are just about spreading awareness, because what we do know, and I know you know this already, Mary, yourself, but what we know is that we as nonviolent people, we outnumber the violent people in a huge way. The number of violent people in our communities is really actually quite small. So again, if all of us who are nonviolent and believe in nonviolence and are practicing that already all the time, if we can be if we can be engaging in this way and doing all of our green dots, at some point, all of those green dots are going to outweigh, or they're going to tip that scale for that scale of the red dots. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And one of the things that one of the statistics that I heard in one of the presentations with Dr. Edwards was that the research indicates that there is somewhere between 20 and 40 people between a victim and a offender. So you have a victim, and I would hope that it would not be my son or my family member, but statistically we know, and from our viewing audience, we know those that are watching have experienced that. But theoretically, in between that occurrence and the offender are 40 people just like you and me, just like the viewer that's watching today. And so really Green Dot, I hear you saying, is about putting tools into people's hands, challenging them to do something, to get involved, to begin to balance or hopefully tip the scale on the side of preventing this terrible crime from happening.
And I think if you imagine, again, it's such a great image. That's an image that always sticks in my head too, that seeing this person over here that is a potential perpetrator and that potential victim over here, and just seeing the swath of people in between. And I think, again, if you imagine that even if each of those 20 to 40 people in here, even if they only did 1 or 2 green dots, it might not be 20, it might not be 100, it might be 1 or 2, but that's a lot of green dots in there if we start multiplying that out, right?
Sure.
You know, and I think that's, again, the power of this message and this campaign and the program, the actual curriculum, is that we're not asking everybody out there to become an advocate or go and work at your program or to do our work full time, but we're asking, can you do 1 green dot? You know, can you do 2? Can you do a couple this week? You know, that's all. Like, it's just about doing something instead of doing nothing.
Well, and I think this transitions us so naturally to that idea of whether it is in the Green Dot curriculum and what that program refers to as obstacles to change or doing something different. You as a life coach, I'm sure, see that in people's lives, that they're at point A, they'd like to get to point B, and so somewhere in between there are several things that appear to be in the way or appear to be hindering us from getting to where we want to be. And so usually on this program we talk about sexual violence and we talk about Green Dot and we talk about ways that folks can get involved. But what I'd really like to begin now to turn to is, yes, on that springboard of getting involved, a more personal self-care discussion for our viewer as we come into the holidays and we know that those are risky times for violence and violent acts to occur, especially domestic violence and sexual assault, for lots of different reasons. As we get ready to move from fall to the holidays to the winter, talk to me a little bit about where do we need to be starting personally to make sure that we are in a good place to be able to do a Green Dot or to be able to make the difference in the lives of those around us.
Well, a couple of things come up for me when I hear you say that, and I think the first one is, again, connecting these two pieces of our conversation from being being the change that we want to see in the world, whether it's about this issue or about something else that we care about. And it is so true that unless we're well ourselves, unless we have a level of self-care and are well enough to go out in the world and be at our best, like, that's going to impact what we can do. It's going to impact the green dots we can do. It's going to impact our work. It's going to impact our family, our interactions with our clients and the projects that we're working on. So again, there is this, whether we're talking about Green Dot or we're talking about this issue, or we're just talking about whatever it is your viewers, however they're occupying their life, self-care to me is really the foundation that allows us to go out and do whatever it is that we're passionate about, whether it's Green Dot or not. So again, you ask, I guess the question is, you're asking sort of, where do you start? Where do you start to sort of assess or tap into that self-care? And the answer that pops into my head, and I don't know if it's going to be particularly useful. It might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I think where we start is where we are, and that's going to look different from potentially day to day. It's going to look different from week to week or at different time periods in our life when we're handling different sort of life occurrences that are happening to us. So I'm not trying to sort of skirt around your question, but I think it really is about we start with getting being mindful. And again, it's not about, I'm not saying that we all need to wake up in the morning and we need to have an hour of meditation and,
right.
you know, things that might feel like someone can handle that. And for somebody else, they might say, I don't have an hour to be checking in with myself every morning.
Sure.
But it is about asking, where am I right now? And what is it that I need? It can be that simple. It can literally be a 1-minute question to yourself, which is, what is it that I need right now? And again, my answer to that might be different in this moment. It might be different tomorrow morning on a Saturday. It might be different in 3 months after I have this baby in my belly. You know, but the question can stay the same.
Well, and let me ask you this too, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm thinking, if I put myself where the viewer is, which is really my role for the show, right?
Sure.
To help engage the viewer in possible questions that they may have for you. We just don't have a way to take those questions. If I were to be thinking maybe like some of them, I would think that my question might be, let's say I ask myself that, what is it that I need right now? And the answer is, I don't know where to begin to answer that question. Maybe there's economic stress, maybe there's job stress, maybe there's relational stress, maybe there's child stress, maybe they've just been victimized and they don't know how to answer that question. As a life coach, how do you help, and what would you say to the viewer that says, I have no idea what I need?
Great question. Again, great question. The first thing I would do, and this is where my role as a coach, and this is a really good distinction for me to make for you and for the viewers as well. As a coach, there's a real distinction between what I do in coaching and, versus what I might do if I was a counselor or a therapist. So as a coach, I'm really working with people on sort of where they are today and where they want to go. I'm not looking at sort of past trauma or past hurts and healing that needs to happen, about sort of the why of it, of really sort of pulling that Band-Aid back and sort of exploring, this is what happened to me in childhood, or from this trauma, or from this event, or I have this mental health condition, and so I want to work on that and heal that. So I'm really focused on sort of the today through here, and not that, again, counselors and therapists aren't also doing some of that work too in their healing work. But as a coach, my perspective is I'm not the expert of your life. You are the expert on your life. So every once in a while, I might be bringing in a resource or a tip or a technique to share with someone in a coaching session. But most of the time, I'm not going to be saying, well, Mary, this is what you need to do, and this is where you need to start. Most of the time, and sometimes it can feel uncomfortable for in that conversation, but most of the time, again, I'm bringing it back to that person that I'm sitting with. So that's, if someone says to me, if a client says to me, I have no idea like how to even know what I need right now. The first thing that I would do would actually be to hold some space for them. I might ask the question in a different way. I might really try to redirect it to them of like, well, if you did know, what do you think it might be? I might ask some questions like that just to see if I held that moment long enough, if again that answer from inside of them could bubble up and could come out. Because what we do know is most of the time we do know, we do have some answers. Even in the moment, we do have some answers. If I'm still getting some resistance from somebody, or again, if your viewers are out there by themselves and they don't have a coach, or they don't have a good friend or a partner, and they're asking themselves this question and they get stuck, one technique and tool that I really, really like to use that begins to help flesh things out. It's a tool that we call, in the life coaching world, we call it the Wheel of Life. And it's a really easy exercise where you just draw a circle on a piece of paper and you just divide it up into pie pieces. And each of those pieces of your pie is going to represent different areas of your life. And you started describing this for me even as you set up this question, Mary. You were saying, well, what if there's stress over here, or there's stress over here, there's stress over here? And so I would ask that person, I would say, again, what are the different areas, if you were to sort of divide out your life into sections, from your physical self-care to your family or relationships to maybe your home, maybe your children, or your role as a parent, or, again, and I usually let my client decide what those pie pieces are. Like, I don't self-define those. I let them self-define them.
Okay.
So they divide those out, and then we start asking, we can ask things like, well, what's going on in there right now? What are the pieces that you might want to change? And they start jotting notes in those little pie chunks, those little pie triangles. We can ask questions like, what would you like for that pie piece to be? What would you love your home to look like? What would you love your spiritual life to look like? What would you be doing in it? And we go around that circle. And so we start seeing what their reality is right now, like what they're living, but also what they really hope for.
Right.
Which then creates this gap, right? Creates this gap so that now all of a sudden they can see what they need.
Exactly.
They can almost answer that question for themselves right there on paper. They can see, like, well, this is where I am, and these are the pieces that aren't in alignment or aren't in place. And this is where I want to be over here. So my need is, how do I fill that in from here to here?
And in our society, I think there is a struggle for being independent versus being dependent. And by dependent, I mean being connected to others at times. I think our society, we very much strive to be, to push, to make it to the next point or whatever. And sometimes we miss that self-reflection or that time of stopping and reflecting on what's not going okay and what needs to change. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. And I think in our work, we see that it might be fear of the unknown, a sense of powerlessness to do anything different than what we've always done, even if it's not working. And so when you're working with folks, what would you say that most people, when they find that gap, when they see that gap, what tends to be the response to the gap?
Oh, yeah. It really varies, again, which makes sense because every person is going to be a little bit different. I get a lot of surprise. I'll get like, I didn't even realize that there are so many pieces that I'm either tolerating or that aren't in alignment with who I really want to be and how I want to live my life. I'll get a lot of emotion from folks. I'll get a lot of almost like it's really settling into their hearts and minds of, wow, like I really am not at the place where I want to be. So there can be a lot of emotion with that. Some folks, right away, they just know. They felt that,
Sure.
I knew that this part over here was
needed some attention
and work, so they'll have that sort of recognition. So it really does vary, sort of the reaction depending on how much reflection that they might have done consciously or unconsciously before we've had that kind of conversation.
Why is self-reflection and self-care important to overall health?
There is a direct, connection to, and again, we could pick up any magazine probably in the grocery aisle tonight, at Kroger or Walmart or wherever we are, that will describe this connection between, and we're back to prevention again. That must be our word, of the hour. But, it is about what are the things that we can do on a regular basis that keep us maintained, that keep our systems well. And I don't just mean physically. Like I think sometimes when people think or hear the word self-care or they read that word in a magazine or a book, they're thinking,
I have to run 3 miles.
I have to. And you said the key word that I have to, you know, that I have to eat a certain way, and I have to be a vegetarian, and I have to, you know, or a vegan, and I can't eat, you know, this or that, and I have to exercise, or I have to go to sleep and get my 8 to 12 hours of sleep every night. And, you know, we start thinking of it in terms of that, which to me feels really hard. It feels hard and heavy, and it feels like I don't want anything to do with that. And it also feels a little bit like it's not personal, or that they don't, like, again, it goes back to how does that resonate with me as a person and with where I am right now in my life? And so for me, I think it's about, it is about what is it that's actually going to keep me at my best? You know, what do I know works for me? And not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, cognitively. How am I challenging myself or getting creative and growing and stretching? What are my relationships like? How do I nourish my spirit? How do I bring myself comfort? You know, what are the things in my life's experience that I know fill me up, that bring me comfort? It might not always be the 3-mile run, you know, it might not be the hour of meditation every morning. Sometimes those things are the pieces that, again, when we get really honest with ourselves, we know that they put us in a better place. But a lot of times it is just really asking, you know, what is it that's going to help me be at my best, you know, even if it's a work in progress.
Well, and I think right there, a work in progress. I think that is where that permission and that gentleness comes from, when we can realize we are who we are and we're headed on a journey to be where we need to be, but we are a work in progress. We are just about out of time, so before we wrap up the program, I'd like to give you the last word, if you would. What would you challenge the viewer with as we head into the fall and we head into seasonal change? What would you challenge them in terms of change for their lives?
What's coming up for me, Mary, is what you just said, because I think more than any other time of our year, when we're heading into the holidays, when we're heading in, for some reason, again, I have a 5-year-old son. You know, I work full time. I am very mindful about practicing self-care. Family is very important to me, and so it's really easy to get really busy with all the things, and we're back to have to, you know, feeling like we have to do those things. And I guess my challenge for all of your viewers today is, as you ease into or coast or fly into the holiday season, it is hearing those words of how can I give myself permission, you know, this year? How can I be gentle with myself? Can I buy, you know, the cooked turkey from Kroger's instead of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, you know, and making it on Christmas morning? You know, where are the little pieces that would actually serve us to be a little bit more gentle, give ourselves a little bit more permission, and trust that again will serve us really well.
And I thank you so much for being here today, and I thank you for your words of encouragement. And thank you, the viewer, for joining us for another edition of the program, as we always want to give you courage to hope and courage to change. We'll see you next time.